Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, as I promised, this is part 2 to This Feels Like a Major One Piece spoiler, Is It Just Me? I would say that this video is kind of necessary for this one to really understand the context of it. I mean, I guess you could watch it anyway. This one's definitely a lot shorter and a lot crazier. But do yourself a favor and go watch this one first. Link is in the description. But the general premise of this video that is essential to know here is that we are comparing various factions in the current One Piece world to those that might have existed during the Void Century. And we hypothesized that the 20 kings which went on to form the world government were at their time similar to the Revolutionary Army today. Of course, the main person of interest within that video was Nefertari D. Lily, who we compared to Vivi, obviously, but more specifically within the Revolutionary Army, we compared to Sabo, and you could probably also make comparisons to Dragon, although we didn't really do that. But the idea is that you can take attributes or aspects of all of these three characters and then combine them, and you can essentially create who Lily was. Her motivations, part of her story from the Void Century, without ever actually having seen it yet. But a character obviously omitted from the entire video, intentionally by the way, was Imu. Imu is such an important character. Obviously we get a sense that Imu is actually from the Void Century, was a founding member of the world government, one of the original 20 kings, and so if Lily has all these parallels, and every character essentially has their parallel from the Void Century, then who is our present day Imu, right? That seems like one of the most important players in the grand scheme of history. Now you might be saying, well, Imu is Imu, right? But it doesn't really work, because the idea is not necessarily who the character is, but the role that they play within this great end battle. Imu now is king of the world, and during the Void Century we speculate Imu and the 20 kings were not rulers of the world. So within the concept of cyclical history, you have this general role of king of the world, pretty much your most powerful individual at the time who ruled everything. While this is Imu now, this was not Imu's role during the Void Century, I don't think. Imu was instead a member of the 20 kingdoms, which dethroned the king, or at the very least got credit for it. It's like that Batman quote, you either die a hero, you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And Imu has definitely lived long enough. So I'm sure that this is as confusing as it is possible to be, but Imu as the king of the world, his main parallel is going to be with whoever the king of the world was during the Void Century. And in the same vein, Imu of the Void Century, that character, the role that they played, is going to have a parallel with somebody other than Imu in the present storyline. So I just want to linger here for a moment, make sure nobody is confused. Essentially, we're looking for a character that would basically be a part of the Revolutionary Army today. This character can have a bad future, where essentially they become king of the world and operate as Imu is doing now. Now this won't happen because history does not repeat exactly. A great quote that I was given that works better here is that history does not repeat, it rhymes. And I think that this applies pretty aptly to One Piece. But there is a character that exists in the present storyline right now who has the potential and in the past became the kind of leader, the kind of king that Imu is. And this character, which exists within the present storyline, can give us clues for Imu's backstory during the Void Century, and perhaps explain their rise to power. So yeah, I basically think the premise of this video is incredibly flawed, because I feel like this is just overly complicated, to the point that too many people are not going to understand, but we're going to continue forward anyway, and we're going to say some wild stuff, and hopefully at some point it all clicks as to what the hell is going on here, and if not, it's entertaining anyway. But what I want to speculate is that our present day parallel of Imu, who embodies aspects of Imu's story during the Void Century, and has the potential of becoming the king of the world, this character is Jewelry Bonney. And we're going to dig ourselves a hole to the other side of the planet in order to create a story which is really interesting and maybe give Bonney more narrative respect than anyone ever has. So yeah guys, let's begin. So I'm of the opinion that Oda had a plan for all the supernovae either as he designed them or shortly afterwards. And each either performs a role in the story that Oda thought that he could utilize, or represent something from the story that is important thematically. Basil Hawkins represents fate. Fate is obviously a thing that is discussed on numerous occasions. And similar to the concept of fate, Revujo seems to be related to faith. Not that we know too much about it. Music is another thing which seems like it's going to be important, and Oda designed Scratchman Apu based on that. Capone, in my mind, connects the underworld organized crime to the world of piracy. And X-Drake is really the precursor to Sword. Marines infiltrating the world of piracy. Undercover heroes. Kid and Law are both foils of Luffy in different ways. Where Law is more strategic, he's more analytical, and offers a different kind of leadership. Whereas Kid is actually very similar to Luffy, but he's just not that guy. And the main reason probably is that he doesn't possess the same sort of attributes that Luffy has that makes everyone around him, ally or enemy, his friend. This exact parallel is actually what's shared between Luffy and Blackbeard. I know you don't like to think of Blackbeard as a guy who makes his enemies his friends, but it kind of works out that way in the story, and it certainly doesn't work for Kid, which is why Kid is not him. But from all this, it becomes a question of what did Oda have in mind when he created Jewelry Bonney? What was the idea there, and what was the plan? Compared to all of the others, I find her to be very poorly defined for the vast majority of the story. And it's not till recently that we start to learn things about her, but even still, it's like different. But if I would take a stab at it, it's possible that Oda wanted to connect the world of piracy with the world of nobility. Kings and queens. Bonney is the daughter of Kuma, who was the king of Sorbet, so there's a loose connection there. I think it's also possible that Oda had intentions of taking Bonney's story into the Revolutionary Army. Certainly that is what has actually happened, and of the Supernova, you don't really have anybody else connected to the Revolutionary Army. But this is, I find, to be an interesting concept, the combination of revolutionary and pirate. Because that is how I see Imu. Imu during the Void Century, along with Lily, was essentially a revolutionary. But the end result of this revolution made Imu the king of the world, which in the story is treated like a pirate-like ambition. And pirates are your most ambitious. Dragon also comments on this a little bit when he first learns that Luffy has decided to become a pirate. He thinks to himself, or says out loud, being a pirate isn't a bad choice either. And I think this is because the Revolutionary Army's objective, in simplest terms possible, is to upset the established order. And pirates are capable of doing the same thing. And I would guess that Dragon is a huge fan of Roger. And I also think that there was possibly history there. But to take this back to Bonney, she is such an interesting character in relation to the revolution, because is she a legitimate member? Really, the answer to this is no. But at the same time, it's also a yes. Or perhaps a soon-to-be yes. Because she is the daughter of Kuma. Now I'm sure we'll get some clarification soon as to exactly how this relationship worked. But as for now, I am of the opinion that the only reason that Bonney is not a member of the revolution is that the world government was holding her hostage to use against Kuma. In chapter 595, we get a conversation between Akainu and Jewelry Bonney where he says, "A cold shiver ran through my spine when I heard that you ran away from the government." So she had been in their custody. As a side note, I encourage everyone to reread all of the Bonney scenes. A lot of them are focused in chapter 595, but throughout Marineford, anytime you see Jewelry Bonney, and then with the knowledge that she is the daughter of Kuma, because I can assure you, nobody was speculating anything regarding Jewelry Bonney at the time related to Kuma, but in hindsight, it fits so perfectly well, and it's just a prime example of incredible writing on Oda's part. Incredible and creative. She literally tells us that there's somebody in the New World that she has to find after something during the reverie seemed to really disturb her, which is obviously now the fact that Kuma lost his personality and she was seeking out Vegapunk. Just incredible. But obviously as a prisoner, she had no opportunity to join the Revolutionary Army. And I would hazard a guess that she didn't manage to escape until after Kuma had joined as a warlord and she became aware that something was wrong with him. The order of events in my mind is Kuma essentially told her when she was shipped off to the government to not do anything that would bring her or him harm. That he was a revolutionary and that someday he would fix this for both of them so that they could go home. But when she saw what her father was becoming, she was forced to escape and try and seek out Vegapunk, which instigated her journey. But because of the way that this is set up, it puts her in very neutral territory, like she's a pirate who is or should be a member of the Revolutionary but doesn't really have any direct ties to any particular member, except for her father. And I think the likely outcome of Kuma's story, and this could be wrong because characters rarely die in One Piece, but when deaths are important or have narrative purpose, Oda is not shy. We saw that in Marineford with Ace and with Whitebeard, and I think the same is probably going to become true with Kuma. I truly believe that Kuma dies, thus creating your most oddball revolutionary. But I want it known, guys, that Oda can twist whatever he wants, however it makes sense to him. But right now, I just want that thought in your mind that Bonney's story could be similar to Imu's. Imu, like Bonney, is a very oddball revolutionary. And Imu, like Bonney, has a very, very tragic backstory. And the one that was responsible for this, just the same as Bonney, was the king of the world during the Void Century and the established world order during the Void Century. The anger at what occurred is ultimately what created the Imu that we see today. And I think Oda is setting up with Jewelry Bonney everything that has happened to her and perhaps will happen, including Kuma's death, could set her along a trajectory that would make her as cruel and as callous as Imu, if she were to ever become king of the world. But I suppose before you buy this, we have to point out the similarities between Bonney and Imu. And then from this make an absurdly wild speculation, which would be awesome if it's true, and predictable if it's not. In a theory recently, we discussed the Dressrosa arc, and argued that Dressrosa represents the One Piece world as it is today. Doflamingo is, in a sense, representing Imu within this microcosm. Honestly, it's kind of more true to see this in Dressrosa than it's given to us in the story, because Doflamingo is a god, he is a celestial dragon, he is the ruler of the world of Dressrosa, but he is also a pirate with his hands literally in every facet of the world, deeply embedded into the underground. And it's kind of how I see Imu. But Oda's pretty explicit with Dressrosa about how everyone acts like everything's okay, when it is very clearly not. And the same applies to the larger scope of the One Piece world. An illusion of peace. And the person responsible for this illusion, more than anyone else, the power responsible for this illusion, comes from Sugar, who I believe also represents Imu, or an aspect of him. Like, you could take Doflamingo, combine it with Sugar, and you would get Imu. But Sugar has always been a very interesting character, and Oda's choice of her powers has always struck a weird chord with fans because it's weird, that's why. There's untold countless number of posts and videos discussing how Sugar's power is broken. She has the Habi Habi no Mi, which allows her to turn people into toys. These toys she has the full ability to control simultaneously, and this is where it gets strange. Sugar doesn't age. It's a product of her fruit. She looks to be 10, right, all throughout the arc, but we know for a fact that she is an adult woman. And it just so happens that her powers also have another side effect, to make it even more wild, that anybody that she turns into a toy is erased from the memories of everyone who ever knew them. So Sugar's Devil Fruit has three things which should all remind you of Imu. She is effectively eternally youthful, or it appears that way. She can literally erase people from existence and then control them. I don't think that you need me to explain this connection. But it actually goes even deeper than you would anticipate, because we've seen Imu speak recently, and this was confirmed by Artur. Imu speaks in a way which is reminiscent of a child, an ancient child. And it makes you wonder whether Imu is physically a child. A literal child sits upon the throne. You have to admit that that is a very Oda-like thing to do. And the entire world and every person living in it is the toys that he's playing with. So the purpose of bringing this up is to, one, sort of establish a little bit of speculation about Imu. Obviously, we're still learning as the story continues, but I think that when we get in the future, it's just going to become even more clear that Imu is some sort of combination of Doflamingo and of Sugar, his powers specifically related to Sugar. So if we're speculating that Imu was originally a member of the 20 Kingdoms, the revolutionary army during their time, what is our present revolutionary, oddball or not, who seems to share these traits? That would be Jewelry Bonney. Guys, I'm of the opinion that Bonney's powers are way more wild than you think that they are. Both in terms of like what it is that it does and how powerful it is. Kinda in the same way that Sugar's fruit is just seemingly by itself in terms of uniqueness. Rather than Bonney possessing just a strict aging fruit, a fruit that allows her to age and de-age herself and others, it's more akin to a fate fruit. Perhaps you could consider it somewhat like the superior version of Basil Hawkins' fruit. Basil Hawkins has some ability to interpret and influence the fate of others. But while you'd classify Basil Hawkins' ability as an influence at best, Bonney can literally manifest certain futures, and also certain pasts, like a multiverse. Her devil fruit can create fates. This thought occurred to me recently in Egghead as Bonney aged the Strads, and we've gotten concepts relating to this in SBS. It's actually fairly common, where readers ask Oda to draw the various futures of characters. This could be the Strads, this could be anyone, right? But you see like two different versions of the same character in the future, the bad future and the good future. And I think that Bonney has the very same capabilities with her fruit. It's not just about making someone older. She can make them older in very specific ways. I like this theory for a number of reasons, not least of which is that I think that it is insanely cool. But you'll notice here, we're comparing Bonney to Imu, and this fruit has similarities to Luffy's Nika Nika. He can manifest dreams, and Bonney might be able to manifest destiny. The interplay between these two concepts couldn't be any more fitting. And while we don't have any direct confirmation yet that Imu has powers that could be related to this, certainly there's aspects which intrigue me. For instance, when Imu holds the various bounty posters of the characters of interest and seems to target specific individuals in order to erase them to create a certain future. I have a feeling that there's going to be a strong fate and destiny theme when it comes to Imu. And specifically, they're going to have a desire to manipulate this. And the conversation itself it just couldn't be any better. Luffy is all about freedom, but how does freedom work with destiny and fate? These two concepts are pretty much the most important in the entire series, and it's a conversation that people have in real life. If destinies are real, are we truly free? Fate then can be seen as a kind of order to the chaos. Everything is not possible. Imu represents this in the story, while Luffy is the chaos. Anything is possible. Diametric forces. And I personally think that Oda's answer to this is kind of embodied with a character like Buggy. Buggy can become the Pirate King. Is it likely? No. I'd put the odds at 99.9999999% chance that Buggy would never accomplish this in his lifetime. But the odds are not zero. Therefore, that fate can be manifested. Anyway, there's a lot of intriguing things about Jewelry Bonney. First off, we don't actually know how old she is. We don't know the name of her devil fruit. We'll get back to this in a second. But I don't think that she understands her powers very well. And I think that as we get closer to the end of the story, she might unlock some things that even she hasn't utilized up until now. Like, as an example, being able to transform herself into a very specific future version that is the strongest in the world. I really believe that this is possible. Likewise, she could potentially do it for others. And in the reverse, of course, as well. This is actually coincidentally similar to what other people are speculating about Imu's abilities right now. That when we see Imu attack Cobra and attack Sabo and the Gorosei, that their abilities are all related to Imu. Like, Imu is transforming the Gorosei using their powers. It could be related to fate. And at the very least, Imu might be able to empower their pawns in a way which is truly frightening. But as you guys can obviously tell, I really think that Jewelry Bonney has a god tier fruit. And I use these words very specifically. Bonney has the powers of a god. Guys, this is a speculation, and I don't think it can be justified quite yet, but I like it, and so I want to share it. This is where the theory gets really crazy. But we don't know Bonney's actual devil fruit yet. I think that information is being withheld for a very specific reason. And that reason is that Jewelry Bonney has the very same abilities as Imu. The very same abilities. And I can already hear you saying, well, how can two people have the very same devil fruit? My answer is because Jewelry Bonney's abilities are not the abilities of a devil fruit. Are you guys ready for this? Prepare yourself. Jewelry Bonney hatched from the egg on Gold Roger's ship. Jewelry Bonney does not possess the powers of a god. She is literally a god. The natural ruler of the One Piece world, Jewelry Bonney is a dragon. Look, I'm going to speculate this until the end of times, until I literally can't anymore, but I believe that dragons have an important role in the history of the One Piece world. There has got to be a reason that the celestial dragons have decided to call themselves celestial dragons. There has got to be a reason why dragons are this hyped up thing. The world government is trying to recreate them, artificial ones. Vegapunk's only devil fruit that he created was that of the dragon. I think that Kaido and Momonosuke's devil fruits are based on something that actually existed, and technically still exists. I don't want to rehash many old theories, but there's been a lot of discussion about dragons in mythology and folklore, specifically Eastern, that of Japan and China. You can think about Shenlong from Dragon Ball Z. Shenlong, when you collect the Dragon Balls, you could make a wish. In a sense, you could control fate, something we've already talked about. But with something like this, you could discuss it from many mythological angles. But let's just focus on Chinese for the sake of it here. Talk about Long Wang, or the Dragon God, the Dragon King, ruler of the four seas, a guardian deity which controls all dragons, sea creatures, the oceans, and the weather. A god with a great temper, but is also seen as a god of good fortune. In the concept of yin and yang, Long Wang is yang. If you understand nothing about yin and yang, it's that seemingly opposing forces can be complementary to nature, which is practically what we've already discussed with freedom versus destiny. As we have discussed in many videos recently, yin and yang is also cyclical. It's a cycle, a never-ending loop. Opposing forces which are fated to balance always. Yin and yang transform each other. Every advance is complemented by a retreat, and every rise transforms into a fall. Thus a seed will sprout from the earth and grow upwards towards the sky. Then when it reaches its full potential height, it will fall. The growth of the top seeks light while the roots grow in darkness. Opposed yet complementary. Equal yet in constant flux. It exists in the moment, and it is also eternal. I hope that without any explanation whatsoever, you guys understand that this concept is related to the story of One Piece. Oda balances, if not all things, most things. But I don't want to dovetail too much. We said Long Wang is yang, and yang is creation, while yin is destruction. And I believe that dragons, or the Dragon King, the Dragon God, is the primordial ruler of the One Piece world. The first god. I think that this has been alluded to actually in Jaya, where they worshipped snakes. And those snakes are very dragon-like in their appearance. There is a freaking reason why Oda decided to draw a huge egg on Gold Roger's ship and leave it totally unexplained. If this amounts to nothing, I will be mad. And so, if we assume that it is important, right, there's a lot of theories out there that I just don't think fit, because it doesn't have enough narrative pull to it. Like, a theory from a long time ago is that we see polka dots on the egg on Gold Roger's ship, which are similar to Pierre, which is the creature that Gonfall, the god of Skypiea, was riding. So aha, Pierre hatched from the egg. No, if Oda's gonna bother to put the egg in the story, something incredible hatched from it, or will hatch from it. And I think that this something was a dragon. But it is important to understand that this dragon has two states of existence. It has a human form and it has a dragon form. This is common in Eastern mythology. Specifically, this is true of Long Wang. I always bring up Fire Emblem, Manichees. And this theory has gotten some fuel recently, because we see Imu's silhouette as he is attacking Cobra and Sabo. And we don't understand why this silhouette exists, what powers are involved here. All I can tell you is that the creature that represents Imu is dragon-like. Specifically, I believe Imu to resemble an axolotl, which is often called a water dragon. I don't know how deep I want to get into this, but it's just cool to know, I guess, that the axolotl in Central and South America was considered a godlike creature. It's very endangered, hard to find. It has absolutely incredible properties by nature relating to regeneration, which could be very fitting here. It also has distinctly childlike characteristics as a salamander. When they were first discovered, it was presumed that axolotl were merely larvae of salamanders, rather than fully formed adults. But yeah, basically the mythology that surrounds it in ancient Central and South American cultures is that it's the master of death. It defies death. And I just want this thought in your brain because we're going to talk about mythologies relating to these cultures in a video sometime soon that is absolutely freaking mind-blowing. Also note, Luffy is supposed to be Brazilian, remember? But to bring this back to emu, I do think that they resemble an axolotl, or a water dragon, and the question is very simple. Is this emu's devil fruit? Or is this what emu actually is? I think during the Void Century, emu was originally an egg. Just as Jewelry Bonney was originally the egg on Gold Roger's ship. Perhaps it functions in a similar way to the powers of Poseidon and Shirahoshi, a creature which comes into existence in some way or hatches every 1,000 years, destined to be the god of that age. So it's time to remind you, we do not know how old Bonney actually is, but from her general characteristics, you can make an argument that she is much younger than she often portrays herself. So I've created a little story around this. Obviously we don't know anything, this could be totally wrong, but I like it. The idea is that there's a connection between Gold D. Roger and Monkey D. Dragon. I wouldn't be surprised if there's more story about dragons specifically related to the incident in God Valley. In his final years and months, Roger asked Garp for help raising his child, Ace. I believe that Roger entrusted the egg to Dragon. It could literally be that he thought that it was funny that Dragon had the name Dragon and a dragon was supposed to hatch from the egg, therefore he should give the egg to Dragon. Who knows? What we do know is that Dragon has no interest in raising any damn children, so he gave the egg to Kuma. The egg hatched and became Kuma's daughter, and you'll note they look nothing alike. There's meaning in the name Jewelry Bonney because Jewelry Bonney is herself a great treasure. And the name Jewelry loosely connects her to the Roger pirates. Gold D. Roger, Gold Roger, Silver's Rayleigh, Scopper or Copper Gabon, Jewelry Bonney. Jewelry Bonney's name is inspired from and based on a real pirate, Anne Bonny. We know that from the original one-shot versions of One Piece there was a character literally called Anne, a woman. And in the story of One Piece we get this small Easter egg that if Ace had been born a girl, that Roger wanted her named Anne. Anne Bonny, Jewelry Bonney. This is, in a convoluted way, Roger's daughter. And she is one of the very most important characters when it comes to endgame One Piece. But as we said, we began this video, the premise of it is that you can look at Bonnie's story and then compare it to Emu. Emu's story will be similar. So just dissect Bonnie's story, like she was the egg which hatched, and then she was cared for by a member of the Revolutionary Army. Just the same, I think that Emu was raised by a prominent member of the Revolutionary Army during its era, the 20 Kingdoms. This person died, while Emu and while Bonney were relatively young, and this shaped their future. When the 20 kings ascended to Mary Joie and claimed themselves to be gods, Emu had inherited the throne of his kingdom, therefore was one of the original 20 kings. But their actual role was very minimal, because as I said, they were young, although beginning to tap into the insane amount of power they had by nature and not by devil fruit. I also believe that Emu consumed a mythical god fruit on top of its nature as a dragon god. Basically, I think that Emu is both this god by nature and also has the devil of the sea devil fruit, which is a god fruit and a part of a trifecta of god fruits that includes the sun god Nika and Blackbeard's moon-related fruit. Both of these simultaneously, with different capabilities from each source of power. Now you can debate or speculate however you want to, this is really not important to me, but the Celestial Dragons called themselves Celestial Dragons, and Emu is in fact a dragon, whether it was immediately when they ascended to Mary Joie or sometime afterwards. Emu is immortal. Like giants live for 300, 400 years, we see Zunisha lives for 800 years. The creature that Emu and Bonney both are live for 1,000 years naturally. And so as every original founding member of the 20 Kings died, Emu did not. And it wasn't because of the perpetual youth surgery, which will be a major twist, and we'll see what comes from that. But the idea is that Emu got the bad future because of the events of the Void Century. That made him angry, and this seed has cultivated for 800 years. particularly against those that he blamed, which were, during the Void Century, pirates and Joy Boy. Imu is a being deified and then corrupted. To bring this back to Jaya and the snakes that the Shandians worshipped, Imu is Kashigami. Kalgra literally beheaded it, not knowing if it was the right thing to do. And Nola, its descendant, is Bonney, a present-day friend, who will likely never be considered a god, and the world is better for it. But anyway guys, this video is actually a lot longer than I hoped that it would be, but I hope that this was enough tinfoil for you. I think that this is really fun. I don't know how likely it is, but certainly something like this could happen, and I would imagine most of us would be pretty freaking elated about it. I didn't even talk about some like related theories here. For instance, within the prophecies that surround Joy Boy, it mentions the dragon god in some facet, like Joy Boy will have the dragon god on its side, or raise it, or something to that effect, right? And we already have parallels here with Shirahoshi, who's also got dragon-like attributes, powers that could be related to this. Luffy is supposed to nurture or guide her, but the same could apply to Bonney. And where I'm going with here is that those that want to be Joy Boy, I think Rox was one of those individuals who thought that they could be this person that would turn the world upside down and might have read into the various prophecies that existed. So Rox needed his dragon. So maybe Monkey D. Dragon is Rox's dragon. And Dragon is not actually Garp's son. Kind of like Ace, he was adopted. Man, I already regret bringing this up because it's totally wild. I'm sure that you guys could just go off here if you're really interested in it. I personally like the theory that Garp raised Dragon, so Monkey D. Dragon is technically correct, like as a son, but then Dragon fell in love with Garp's literal biological daughter, who is Luffy's mom, so weirdness a little bit there, but Luffy is half dragon. And then you would also have like 3 present-day dragons. You would have Imu, you would have Dragon, and you would have Jewelry Bonney, which could relate to the trifecta of powers we discussed earlier with the sun, the moon, and the sea. Your primordial deities. Anyway, I will literally stop. You guys just go off to your heart's content. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and at the very least something was thought-provoking. As always, leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Remember to check out my book, The Booms. Volume 1 and 2 is out. Links in the description as well as pinned in the comments. If you guys like theories like this, you'll probably like my book. Like the video, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, join the squad, and as always guys, have a wonderful day.